The air was thick with silence, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes you feel like something is watching. In the small town of Elderbrook, people still lower their voices when they walk past the ruins of St. Benedict's church. They don't make eye contact. They cross themselves. And they never, ever speak of the choir boys. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Back in 1912, St. Benedict stood proud with its tall stone tower, stained glass windows, and the ringing of bells that echoed through the hills every Sunday. It was the heart of the town, a place where people gathered not just to pray, but to feel safe. But under all that stone and stained glass, something else was buried. And it wasn't just the dead. The first time someone said the word missing, it was whispered by a woman named Eliza Rowan. Her son Thomas had gone to the church for choir practice. He was 8. Eliza said she watched him walk up the church steps that evening in his little red scarf. She never saw him again. They told her he must have wandered off. Maybe into the woods. Maybe to a friend's. They told her children run away all the time. But Eliza knew her son. He was quiet, soft-spoken, afraid of the dark. He wouldn't just vanish. She waited outside that church every day for weeks, sometimes in the rain. She stopped eating. Her fingers bled from clutching that scarf. And when winter came, she stopped coming altogether. People said grief had driven her mad. But others began to whisper. Because Eliza wasn't alone. 3 more boys disappeared within 6 months. All of them choir boys. All of them last seen inside St. Benedict's. You would think a town would panic. You'd think there'd be protests, investigations, outrage. But Elderbrook didn't work that way. The priest, Father Aldrich, was respected. He spoke in calm, measured words, promised prayers, held vigils. He stood at every funeral with a bowed head and wet eyes. And slowly people began to believe it was just tragedy, a string of bad luck. But they didn't see what the gravediggers saw. In 1913, a man named Callum Finch took over burial duties at St. Benedict's Cemetery. He was quiet, nearly mute, and didn't mix with the town. But one night he showed up at the sheriff's home shaking. He said the earth near the southern wall of the church wasn't right. Said it sank strangely when he walked on it. That it smelled sweet, like rot trying to hide under flowers. No one believed him. Not then. You see, the truth about St. Benedict's didn't come out until decades later, when the church caught fire in 1965. It burned slowly, almost like it was reluctant to go. And when the southern wall collapsed, firefighters found something buried beneath the stones. It wasn't one body. It was dozens. 45 small skulls. Stacked. Wrapped in old linen robes. Some still had rosaries clutched in their bony hands. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because there's something else. Something people never talk about. In 1937, a group of boys were caught sneaking into the church at night. They said they'd heard voices, singing, Latin hymns. They were found standing around the pulpit, swaying, eyes wide open but completely blank. One of them tried to claw his own ears off. The priest who found them claimed it was hysteria. Nothing more. But the next morning, the altar cloth was soaked in blood. And no one ever spoke to those boys again. By the time the bones were found, the town had already decided on its story. Old plague victims, they said. Maybe war refugees. People offered answers without being asked, their voices tight, like they were trying to convince themselves more than anyone else. But there were no records of a plague. No military logs. No missing persons reports that matched the number or location. Nothing but dust, bones, and a silence that hung too heavy in the air. The local historian Matthew Klein tried to make sense of it. He pored over old parish files, newspapers, and diaries, but most of the church's records were destroyed in a mysterious flood back in 1931. The entire basement archive, soaked in muddy water, its pages melted into each other like paper mache. Some said it was a pipe burst. Others said lightning struck during a storm. But oddly, no other building in the area had water damage. Just the church. Then there was the testimony of Sister Mary Ann. She was quiet most of her life, devoted to prayer, rarely seen outside the stone walls of the rectory. But after the fire in 1965, something in her cracked. She sat across from the burning church all night, whispering things into the smoke. When someone asked what she was doing, she said, "I'm telling them it's over. I'm telling them they can stop waiting." Reporters came the next day, drawn by the horror of the discovery and the mystery surrounding it. Most townspeople refused to speak. But Sister Mary Ann agreed. Her voice was calm. Her words terrifying. She said the boys never left the church because they were never meant to. That Father Aldrich had a special calling, and that he told the children their prayers would bring them closer to heaven. She said she once opened a locked storeroom and found 5 of the choir boys kneeling in a circle, eyes closed, hands tied with rosary beads. When she screamed, they didn't move. When she tried to untie them, one whispered, "He said we'd wake up angels." She never saw those boys again. The church told her she'd imagined it, that she was unwell. She was sent away for a spiritual retreat for 6 weeks. When she came back, the storeroom was bricked shut, and no one spoke of it again. In her final interview, Sister Marianne said the worst part wasn't the silence, it was the music. They kept singing, she said, long after they were gone. I'd hear it at night, drifting through the hallways. Latin hymns. Soft voices. Always the same song. When asked why she never left the church, she smiled sadly. Because someone had to listen. 2 days after that interview, she vanished. Some said she was moved to a hospital upstate. Others claimed she took a vow of silence and went to a convent overseas. But there's no admission record. No obituary. Nothing but an old photo of her sitting on the church steps, hands folded, face hollowed by secrets she could no longer carry. Now pause for a moment. If stories like this pull at something inside you, if you feel the chill of forgotten voices, of hidden graves, of churches that pray with blood on their floors, subscribe. Because these stories aren't gone. They're just waiting to be heard. And we're the ones still listening. Let me take you further back now, just for a moment, to 1926. A traveling photographer named Langston Moore came to Elderbrook. He was working on a series called Voices of Faith, photographs of small churches across America. He was hired by the diocese to capture images of St. Benedict's for a commemorative book. Langston spent 2 days taking pictures. He shot the bell tower at dawn, the stained glass windows at sunset, the inside of the sanctuary in candlelight. He said the place felt too quiet, like it was trying to hold its breath. When he returned home and developed the film, something was wrong. In nearly every photo taken inside the church, there were blurred outlines. Small figures. Children. Some standing behind pews, some kneeling, hands clasped, eyes open. One figure appeared in 4 different photos. A boy with a crooked smile and a twisted collar. In one photo, he was standing right behind Langston's tripod, though Langston swore no one had been there. Shaken, Langston returned to Elderbrook to share the photographs. But the church doors were locked, boarded, and the town wouldn't speak to him. They denied commissioning the work, claimed he must have been mistaken. That night, he left Elderbrook and never returned. He mailed the photos to a paranormal journal under a fake name. Only one was published. It shows the empty pews of St. Benedict's, and in the background, a small boy staring straight at the camera, though his face is half faded as if time itself was trying to erase him. The caption read, St. Benedict's Choir, 1926. Still waiting. But the strangest discovery came in 1978, when a group of architecture students from the State University were granted access to the burned remains of the church as part of a historical preservation study. While measuring the southern wall, they found a loose stone. Behind it was a crawl space. And inside, stacked in perfect rows, were 45 pairs of children's shoes. Dusty, decayed, some still tied. None of the students ever spoke publicly about what else they saw, but one of them, Henry Pierce, wrote a personal letter to the State Archive 2 years later. In it, he said something moved inside the crawl space. Something that breathed without making sound. He said he felt dozens of small eyes watching him in the dark. That he left his measuring tape and ran. At the bottom of the letter, he wrote just one sentence. That place remembers everything. And maybe it does. There's a photo still hanging in Elderbrook's town hall. It's faded now, curled at the edges, but if you look closely, you can see the congregation of St. Benedict's posing outside the church on Easter Sunday, 1914. Everyone is smiling. Men in wool suits, women with hats, children clutching their parents' arms. But behind them in the church doorway stands Father Aldrich. His expression is blank. Not stern, not kind. Just empty. Like he's somewhere else. And if you zoom in, really zoom in, you'll notice something even more unsettling. There are 5 children standing beside him. They're not dressed in Easter clothes. They aren't smiling. And according to the church records, none of them had living parents in Elderbrook at the time. No one remembers their names. It's like they were added later, or never meant to be there at all. Decades later, the town would try to rewrite that photo. Some said it was a double exposure. Others said it was a joke or a printing error. But they never removed it. Maybe they were afraid of what would happen if they did. There's always been a pattern with that church. Just when people think they understand what happened, something else rises from the cracks. Like what happened to the electrician in 1983. His name was Cole Breyer, a Vietnam veteran with a strong jaw and a quiet manner. He'd been hired to check the wiring after a group of investors considered turning the ruins into a historical museum. Cole didn't believe in ghosts or demons. He believed in broken wires and bad blueprints. That's what he told his wife the night before he went in. But he never came out. When the sheriff found him 2 days later, Cole was sitting in the old pulpit, barefoot, with both of his boots placed neatly in front of him. His shirt was buttoned up wrong like a child had dressed him. And his hands? His hands were covered in Latin script. He'd carved it in himself, with a screwdriver. They said he was babbling when they carried him out, speaking in a language no one could understand. But one word he repeated over and over again, Benedicite. It means bless you in Latin. Cole never worked again. He spent the rest of his life in a care facility 2 towns over. He never spoke of the church. But his daughter claimed he used to whisper in his sleep, talking to the barefoot ones. Let me tell you something stranger. In 1992, a local filmmaker named Mason Dreer released a short documentary about the fire at St. Benedict's. It aired on public television, nothing fancy. He interviewed former townspeople, showed old photos, told the story in a calm, respectful tone. But after the film aired, his house was broken into. The only things taken were the original tapes, some old photographs, and a wooden box labeled choir log. The thieves didn't touch his TV, his safe, or even the cash he kept in the kitchen drawer. They took only what connected to the church. When asked about it later, Mason just shook his head and said, I shouldn't have dug so deep. Some stories don't want to be told. But stories, like secrets, don't stay buried forever. In 2001, a woman named Evelyn Harrow purchased the land surrounding the ruins of St. Benedict's. She was a spiritualist, fascinated by sacred geometry, ley lines, and ancient rituals. She believed that certain places held spiritual energy, and that St. Benedict's was one of them. She set up a tent near the southern wall and stayed for 7 nights, meditating, fasting, documenting every sensation she experienced. On the 4th night, she reported hearing footsteps on broken stone, and a humming like bees trapped in a jar. She wrote in her journal, the children sing without mouths. They hum from inside the bones. But the most chilling entry came on the 7th night. I finally saw them. All 45. Standing in a ring, eyes black, hands folded. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They were waiting for someone. She left the next morning and never returned. You can still read her journal. It's archived in the state library. But one page is missing. Torn clean from the spine. No one knows what it said. And then, there's the final story, the one most locals refuse to believe because believing it would mean accepting something worse than ghosts. It involves a boy named Jesse Hartwell. In 2007, Jesse was 12 years old. A quiet kid. Loved drawing, rarely spoke. He and his mother had just moved to Elderbrook to live with Jesse's grandfather, who was ill. One day, Jesse wandered near the church ruins while his mother was at work. When she came home, he was sitting on the front porch with a notebook in his lap. Inside were 45 drawings. All of them were portraits. Childlike faces, some smiling, some crying. Each one with a name written underneath. Some of the names matched the original missing choir boys. Others didn't appear in any records. But the creepiest part? Jesse said he didn't draw them. He said a man in a black robe gave him the notebook. Told him to hold their faces safe. Jesse's mother didn't believe him at first. Thought it was a strange fantasy. But when she tried to burn the notebook, the fire wouldn't catch. The pages curled but never turned to ash. Later that year, Jesse stopped speaking altogether. He never said another word. When he turned 15, he began sleeping on the floor beside his bed, hands folded across his chest like he was in a coffin. His mother said he'd wake up humming the same slow hymn every night. Eventually, she moved him to another town. New doctors, new school, new life. But every year on October 4th, the date the fire started, Jesse would draw 45 faces again. Always the same faces. Never one more. Never one less. Some say he's still drawing them. Some say he's just a vessel now. You see, St. Benedict's didn't die in 1965. Its roof caved in, its pews turned to ash, but something remained. Something deeper than walls or windows. Maybe it's the memory of children who trusted too much. Maybe it's the silence of prayers that were never answered. Or maybe it's just the sound of 45 souls still waiting for someone to say their names. Whatever it is, Elderbrook still hears it. Even now, if you stand near the old southern wall at dusk, some say you can feel the ground breathe. And if you listen closely, you might hear the choir begin. No one in Elderbrook speaks the names anymore. Not out loud. Not since the fire. Not since the bones. Not since the sound of 45 tiny voices was heard one last time in the wind and then, never again. But there was one man who tried to make it right. One man who thought truth, even if it came too late, might be enough. His name was Dr. Adrian Feld, a forensic archivist. In 2015, the diocese granted him special permission to re-examine the ruins of St. Benedict's. They didn't publicize it. No press. No ceremony. Just one man, a flashlight, and the keys to a past everyone else was still trying to forget. Adrian wasn't a spiritual man. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in files, in bone structure, in DNA, in the science of closure. But what he found beneath the foundation broke everything he thought he knew. In what remained of the crawl space, just beyond the stone shelf where the shoes were found, he discovered a second chamber, sealed with a rusted iron door. Behind it, buried in layers of plaster and ash, were small wooden markers. Not crosses. Not graves. Just short, splintered planks of wood, carved with Latin phrases. He transcribed them one by one. 45 in total. Each one read, Ego sum hic. I am here. That alone might have been enough to chill the blood. But it was what lay beneath the planks that destroyed him. Each one marked a hollow cavity. Inside were not just bones but teeth. Rows of them. Neatly placed like collections. Baby teeth, some still with roots. Each one tucked into a red cloth pouch. Adrian cataloged every pouch, photographed them, and submitted a quiet report to the diocese. They never responded. He never received a check. Never got another call. And within 6 months, Dr. Adrian Feld was dead. They said it was suicide. Jumped from a bridge in the next county. But his brother said Adrian had been different after the excavation. Kept murmuring in Latin. Said he woke up every night to the sound of children sobbing under his bed. His personal journals were never released. But his last email, sent to a colleague just 48 hours before his death, read, I was wrong. This wasn't a mass burial. It was a ritual. And it's not finished. The church still stands in ruin. A skeleton of stone. A hushed memory with ivy crawling up its walls like veins trying to bring it back to life. Tourists come sometimes. Paranormal investigators. TikTokers looking for a scare. But none of them stay long. They say their phones die suddenly. Batteries drain without warning. Audio clips catch faint voices whispering names they didn't speak. And always the humming. It's never loud. Just faint enough to make you question yourself. Just soft enough to feel like it's coming from inside your own head. The people of Elderbrook don't look at the ruins anymore. They've learned to turn their eyes away, like turning your back on a grave you never asked to dig. They walk their dogs around the long way. They build fences that don't face it. Even the maps on the town's website have removed the label. It's no longer St. Benedict's Church. It's just unmarked site. But some things don't care if you name them. Some stories remember you even if you try to forget them. In 2022, a group of college students made a documentary called Benedict's Children. They filmed interviews with retired police, descendants of choir members, and paranormal experts. It gained traction online. Millions of views. People were hooked. One of the students, a girl named Talia, said something in an interview that felt more honest than anything else. I don't think they want justice. I think they want someone to stay. Someone who won't run like everyone else did. Talia disappeared 2 weeks after the premiere. No forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Just her jacket on the floor and her phone recording on the table. 12 hours of static and humming. The police chalked it up to college stress. Vanishing wasn't new in this story. But when her mother went through her things, she found a notebook under her mattress. 45 names. Drawn in circles. Over and over again. And in the center of the last circle, one final word. Amen. Some say the church was cursed. Some say it was a portal. Some say the children were sacrificed, their spirits bound to the stones by faith twisted into something dark. But maybe the truth is even worse. Maybe someone promised them heaven, and they believed it. Maybe the real sin wasn't the burial or the silence or the fire. Maybe it was hope. Because hope is what kept them kneeling. Hope is what kept them singing. Hope is what made them say yes again and again, until all that was left were echoes in the walls and teeth in the dirt. And hope is what makes people still go looking, thinking they'll be the one to explain it, to solve it, to free them. But no one frees the choir. They don't want out. They want you in. Every year on October 4th, the date the fire began, a light appears in the southern window of the ruin. Faint. Flickering. Too high up to be a candle. Too soft to be a spotlight. People say it's the sun hitting broken glass. Others say it's the call. The final hymn. And if you stand in just the right spot at just the right time, the wind might carry the words to you. Not in English, not in Latin, but in something older, something colder, something only the dead still remember. So if you ever visit Elderbrook and you find yourself near the edge of town, and you feel a chill crawl across your skin like fingertips, turn around. Don't look at the ruins. Don't step past the gate. Don't listen to the humming. And above all, don't sing back.